All right, everybody. Let's see. That's good. We're live. We're live. Paul's about to call in. We got a lot to talk about.
Hello.
Hi. Your audio is selected on the other mic.
Sorry, what?
Your audio is not on the microphone.
Okay,
Camera.
I can barely hear you, by the way.
You can't hear me.
Let's see, microphone. Right. Yeah, why wouldn't this have changed? Okay. Is that better?
Oh my God, so much better. How's my audio to you? Is it good?
Still really low.
I'm low. I shouldn't be. I'm at the same level as you here. Oh, actually, I am low, I think, to you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I mean, my system volume is like double what it normally is, and I can barely hear you.
Okay, let me see this. Hold on. And the audio is being outputted through the right. You can hear everything else through those headphones, right? I'm the only issue.
Sorry, it's all right. I can't. What?
You cannot hear me at all. Very low.
I can barely hear you.
I don't know why, considering our levels are the same here. Suncast. Where's Suncast? I'm looking here. I mean, it's my levels here are fine. One, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Can you I'm wondering if it's not selecting the right audio source for your headphones. Did you change that by any chance when you change your mic?
I can't really hear you. I'm sorry. Oh, I heard you say, I wonder something. What does that mean? Microphone, camera. I mean, I can hear it in my headphones. It's just really low. Is there a setting for that, for speakers or whatever?
Let me see if I can find it.
I don't see one. I don't know. I don't see one. Let's see, volume mixer. I mean, I could turn it up, I guess, for Edge. I don't know, but it's going to be like, say something now.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. Hey.
Yeah, like your voice right now is normal, but my volume is at 90%.
That
like
makes,
so.
But
like if there's going to be like if a system sound occurs, it's going to be really loud.
I don't understand that. Curious if Suncast is going to have that problem. Let me see. Camera.
I mean, whatever. We can. I mean, as long as the recording's fine, I guess it's
sound. Okay. Should be fine. I mean, I don't know why. That is bizarre. Let me see if he could hear me. And then we'll do that. I mean, it could be a balance issue, but I don't know. I'm normally very loud. And 1, 2, 3. I mean, I'm looking at the levels.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
They seem to be fine here, but.
One second.
Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2.
It's all right.
I wonder if the app volume control lowered, or maybe it's the communication thing in Windows where it ducks out the audio. Interesting. But it's fine now? You could hear me?
Yeah, I mean, I mean,
Annoying.
hopefully there will be no other sounds
Oh, I hope
because
I hope there
they're going to
aren't either.
be incredibly loud. But yeah, I can hear you
All
fine.
right. We're live there. Close this. See, we're on YouTube. Hey, guys. Hey, everybody on YouTube. All right. Did we tweet this out that we're live? Just do that. What the Tech is live. There is a lot to talk about. I mean, I thought this would be an interesting conversation to have, considering the decade is ending. I think this is an interesting discussion to have about the top devices of the decade, top technology in general. I mean, we're going to go back and forth, but
Yep.
okay. I'm ready to start. How about you?
Yep.
Okay. You know what's interesting? When I play this video, I'm going to play it before anything, and you tell me if it's very loud or if it's still low, okay?
Okay. Oh, is this like the intro video?
Yeah.
I
I
usually
wanna
don't think I hear the sound usually, do I? I don't
You
remember.
should. Let me see.
This episode of What the Tech is brought to you by
Can you hear that?
Molecule. Molecule is reimagining the
You do. Is
future
it
of clean air, starting with
louder?
the air purifier.
I can't
For
hear you.
10% off your first air purifier.
Now, was that louder
It's
than
louder.
me?
It's not painfully loud.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay, I'm going to begin. Guys, we're going to start now in 3, 2, and 1.
This episode of What the Tech is brought to you by Molecule. Molecule is reimagining the future of clean air, starting with the air purifier. For 10% off your first air purifier, visit molecule.com. That's MOLEKULE.com and enter the promo code Andrew10 at checkout. HelloFresh shops, plans, and delivers step-by-step recipes, pre-measured ingredients, so you can just cook, eat, and enjoy. To get 9 free meals with HelloFresh, go to HelloFresh.com/WTT9 and use the code WTT9.
What the Tech? What the Tech?
Hey everybody, welcome to What the Tech. I'm Andrew Zarian, and I'm joined by, of course, the great, the wonderful Mr. Paul Thurrott. How you doing, Paul?
Well, I don't know. How you doing?
I'm doing wonderful, actually. I'm having a good day. We got a
Yeah.
lot of stuff to talk about today. Actually, I'm excited to do the show with you.
Mhm.
I think this is a first for us because we were not doing a show
Right.
for an entire decade last time the decade went over.
Mhm.
I think we started doing the show in 2010 or 11 together, probably 2011. I think. So
Yeah,
we've
I have
been.
a hard time remembering that.
I know it's crazy, but we've been covering technology together for over almost a decade now, and
Mhm.
the decade's coming to a close. So I thought it would be a fun show for us to kind of go through some of these stories and big tech misses and tech hits
Right.
and of the decade. Obviously, some of you guys could kind of predict what they're going to be. I mean, off the top of my head, I could probably throw a couple of them. I also have a couple curveballs that a lot of you guys may not think were as big innovators or huge stories of the decade, but I'm curious to see
Okay.
what Paul thinks. I want to know also from the chat room. We're doing this live, obviously, on Tuesday here, and I want to know from the chat room what they think were big tech moments of the decade. But Paul, you're in New York this week, right? I'm going to see you on Thursday.
That's right.
What are you here for?
It's an HP event.
Those are always fun.
Yeah, I think it's like a pre-CES kind of thing.
Nice. You know what's funny? Do you think CES has the importance that it did 10 years ago?
No. Maybe that could be a story for the.
I
the
think that
decade.
is a story, right? But I think that kind of plays a part because I remember doing those CES shows with you. Like where
Yeah.
we would just cover all the cool stuff from CES, and I feel like every year we cover that less and less.
You've heard the phrase, obviously, too big to fail. CES is like too big to matter anymore. It's just stupid, you know.
Yeah, I think
And
Apple
I
teaching
will
everybody how to
say,
do one.
yeah, I don't want to go to Vegas, but it would be worth it for me personally to go to Vegas just to meet with PC and device makers for one day and then get out of there. Like skip the show floor, but that doesn't make a lot of sense financially and
Yeah.
whatever. And you know, most of what they're people are announcing, you can cover remotely. So
Also, a lot of the stuff that they're announcing is no longer important to be announced at CES. Before, almost every
yeah,
manufacturer was announcing something tremendous there. Every year, there were
yeah.
devices that were going to come out in 6 months or a year.
Well, you know what it is though, and this factors into the conversation we're about to have, because any conversation about the biggest tech of the past decade has to include the smartphone maybe as number one. And I think that transition kind of made CES less interesting. There are no major smartphone announcements at CES because Mobile World Congress is a month later.
Yeah,
And that kind of relegates it to PC, which is not particularly interesting to most people. The smart home stuff and automotive and home like hi-fi and theater and that kind of thing. But
yeah, but
it's just
how about
not. I
this?
don't. It's
How about the fact that everybody does a huge tech announcement twice a year
yeah.
now? Microsoft
Well,
has
right.
numerous announcements. Apple, Samsung.
Yep.
I mean, the ones that really matter have
Yeah.
their own. They don't.
Yeah, because they want to message their own announcements on their time schedule, right? Back when Steve Jobs was still around and Apple did like I think it was a twice yearly Macworld, which was actually an IDC show, if I'm not mistaken. It certainly wasn't owned by Apple, regardless. They didn't like having to conform to that schedule, and I think
Yeah.
it was January and then I don't know summertime, something like that. So now summer or Apple does their own thing, and Samsung, like you said, does their own thing. Microsoft does their own thing. But most of these companies, Amazon does their own thing. Like this is Google does. Yeah, and so I don't know those things. There are still waves of releases for different types of products. PCs. There will be new PCs announced at CES. I mean, that will be part of it. That's the little part of it I might be personally interested in. But there are PC announcements in the fall at IFA. There are smartphone announcements all year long. Depending on
Yeah.
different schedules.
It's fascinating. I mean, it is an interesting thing where that has kind of taken a back seat in a way
Yeah.
to what everybody else is doing. But obviously, there's still so much going on, and obviously, I want to talk about a lot of this. Before we continue, Paul, I know this is going to be a really fun show, and I do want to talk about something that's really fun, and that's HelloFresh. You're a big cooker. You love to cook. I think you and I have spoken.
I'm often cooked. Is that what you're saying?
You are cooked. You've been
Mhm.
cooked for the past decade, Paul. That's what it is.
Yes.
But your wife,
Yeah.
you enjoy.
Is
Your
this
wife
an
and you-
intervention, Andrew?
this is how I begin talking about HelloFresh. Paul,
Mhm.
you've been cooked for about 10 years, but
Yeah, we
you
need to talk.
enjoy. You and your wife enjoy cooking together, which
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that too. It's a moment
Mhm.
for me where I get my glass of wine and we start cooking something different, something totally different than what we normally is in our realm. And HelloFresh totally helps with that. And this is something amazing. HelloFresh does the shopping for you. They do the planning, and they also deliver step-by-step recipes and instructions on how to make this with pre-measured ingredients. That makes it really fun. And like, how many times and this is a big problem for me. Like, I don't keep a lot of the like the specialty sauces in my house. Like if I don't have oyster oyster sauce, or I don't have a sesame oil and things like that. And it kind of sucks when you have all the ingredients and you want to make something different and you can't do it because you got to now go to the store to buy an entire container of this thing, which you're only going to use once over the next year. What HelloFresh does is they put all of that in there. So everything is pre-measured. Everything is great. So you could cook together, eat, and then enjoy your meal together. And here's a great offer they have for you guys. And this is actually unbelievable. You get 9 free meals with HelloFresh when you go to HelloFresh.com/WTT9. That's HelloFresh.com/WTT9. And you use the code WTT9 when you check out. And all these recipes take under 30 minutes for me, generally, when I'm making it, which is awesome. And it's super flexible. So depending on how many times you cook at home, you could maybe do X amount per week where you get your HelloFresh orders, or you could do less if you want. You could also change it back to back. You could skip a meal. They have a family plan. They have a vegetarian plan. I try to do the family plan because I got so many people I got to feed, like my kids. Paul, who said who? Nobody warned me it's expensive to feed kids. Nobody gave me that warning.
You know what? I think there's a little Schadenfreude here, where parents who are up on like the expense of children just gleefully watch other people make this same mistake.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
just so they can enjoy it.
Yeah, so I always opt in for the family meals with them with them guys. Jesus, I'm losing my mind with those guys. The family recipes, you could do vegetarian, or you could do their whole menu series like the Hall of Fame and the craft burgers, which I absolutely love. These guys are unbelievable. I'm a big fan of HelloFresh, and the fact that a lot of my friends now subscribe to it, it's awesome when we talk about what meals we got, which I love. HelloFresh.com/WTT9. Use the code WTT9 and get 9 free meals, which is unbelievable. I want to thank HelloFresh for supporting the show, and hopefully they continue to support us in 2020. Let's talk about 2020. The decade's over, Paul. Time's over. The show's done. I'll see you next time, okay? It's over. Let's talk about some of the big moments from early on in the year, in the decade.
Hey, before we do that,
yeah,
real quick.
Yeah.
So I when you asked me about this topic, like doing this today, I sort of said, I was like, yeah, of course, that sounds good. And then I literally didn't do any research at all. So just as we were starting the show,
which is a way we like to do the shows, by the way.
Yeah,
we like to put as little
coming in hot, But I thought this was kind of interesting because I came up with a PC World article from 10 years ago that talked about the previous 10 years.
Oh my God, let's do it.
And this is kind of fascinating because of how different things are today. I'm not going to read all of them because some of them might factor into what we're going to talk about.
Do you have that article?
Sure.
Now,
I'll send it to you, but I'm coming from the bottom of it because I actually don't like the order they did this in.
So it's of the 2000s, correct?
Yeah, from 2000 through 2009.
Okay.
So a lot of it's like Microsoft focus, right? Like Gates leaves Microsoft. You know, the social networking and the battle for Facebook. Vista delays. Windows Vista. Like really? The rise of Google. HP merges with Compaq. I bet nobody even remembers that.
But you know what? That kind of plays into the PC industry essentially getting smaller and smaller amongst the big guys like and then you had the introduction of guys like Acer and Asus coming to the game.
Right. Yeah, right. Yeah, that's an interesting story. It doesn't have anything to do with the past decade in a way, but that is actually an interesting story because it's sort of like when Microsoft dropped the Nokia phone business. The companies that had been doing this for a long time had built up a lot of infrastructure. There's a lot of expense involved with that, and they weren't as fast moving or as agile as smaller companies. And so, like, I think companies like Acer and Asus and forgetting some names here. Sorry, there's a couple of others who kind of smaller PC makers who came in on the side. Maybe some of them used to be like ODMs that used to design PCs for the bigger companies, are able to kind of operate with less overhead. It's kind of interesting. So by the way, sorry, just two more real quick.
No, go through it because I have it open.
Oh, okay. What's that?
I have the page open, so this is an awesome list.
Well, no, I don't want to spend I just want to go through it quickly. You know what I mean? Like, there's no reason to like stand on the mountain and die here. It's just interesting because it's a lot of Microsoft stuff. Apple launches the iPod, and then the whole .com boom and bust, right? Which I think we just kind of forget about this stuff. Like, it's funny.
It's gone because it's so big now. The .com boom happened again, even better.
Yeah. So like I think if someone were like these guys probably did something like this or are going to do something like this for the subsequent decade, I don't think Microsoft plays much of a role at all in that, like they did in that previous decade. I think that was their swan song pretty much.
Yeah. Interesting. I have another one that's the best gadgets, devices. This is actually hysterical to look at. All those Bluetooth earpieces. That's gone. That didn't exist this decade. The Griffin.
Did I tell you? I used to go to this gym in Boston around Dedham, and so this would have been 10 more years ago. I don't remember, but the guy who ran the gym used to always show up. He'd be wearing like a trench coat, and he had like one of those Bluetooth, the big ones, the big knob thing. And I'd be like, I said to him one day, I was like, "Where did you just come from? The Matrix?"
Such an ass.
I just,
I have to tell you, you are a jerk.
He
You
asked me
ruined
one
this
time.
guy.
He was really involved with all the like the local town stuff. He was because he's like a local businessman and everything. And he said, "Are you involved in the town at all?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, do you like participate in chamber of commerce stuff or whatever?" And I'm like, "No, I pay taxes." It's like that's the extent of my
that's how I'm
involvement in this town.
participating. No,
Yeah.
so you know what? Let me touch on this a little bit, okay? Some of the devices that we no longer talk about. The iPod,
Yeah.
gone from this decade,
Yep.
right? TiVo DVR.
Actually, real quick though,
Yeah.
let me ask you, and I think anyone listening to this, I still see this. You go to a hotel, it could be like a Hyatt, I think has these. Any hotel, you'll see like an alarm clock that has like an iPod connector on it.
The old one, the 30 pin.
Yeah, like the old,
Yeah.
like whatever that was called, the wide one. Really
Yeah,
strange. Like it's amazing how quickly that stuff came and went.
Well, it because we're proprietary nonsense, right? That's the amazing thing
Yeah,
about that.
no, I know, but they moved. I mean, Apple moved right past it, and they kind of stranded an entire generation of peripherals.
Yeah. This is actually fascinating. I'm looking at a different list, and I'll go through this really quickly.
Mhm.
TiVo DVR.
Yeah.
Came out in 99, 2000. Unnecessary, right? And it's an
totally
extinct product.
unnecessary.
How about the Griffin GPS? All those GPSs, the TomToms
Yep,
and
the
the
standalone
Garmin, I'm
GPS,
sorry,
yeah.
Garmin
Yep.
GPS. Standalone
Garmin, yep.
GPS is gone. This one's obviously they show on the Wii and the Kindle. The Amazon Kindle's still around. That survived.
It did, but it's kind of a niche device in a way, right? Because everyone has turned to has to be the number one item on our list, right? The smartphone / iPhone
The iPhone
has
yeah.
to be number one. It's the Uber device. It's the thing everyone has. It does everything. It has replaced so many things.
Everything.
so many
Slingbox gone.
It's like, geez, Slingbox.
BlackBerry non-existent from
Yep.
2000. I mean, 2002 would have been their peak. Non-existent. Xbox 2002 still a key player. Microsoft is really still. I mean,
Yeah.
let me pull back here. PlayStation 3 obviously. This is fascinating. The Airport Express. The Apple Airport Express.
That's a nonsense edition.
This is a nonsense edition.
Apple gets too much credit for stuff they didn't do anything with.
How about
They
this
didn't
one?
innovate in Wi-Fi. They didn't.
Wait a minute. They didn't innovate Wi-Fi? I thought they did.
Well, I mean, Apple likes to take credit for things. Like we removed the floppy first. We added Wi-Fi first or something, even though they didn't, or whatever it is. Like they don't get all of those. Like
Yeah.
whatever. Everyone Wi-Fi, whatever.
A flip video camera. Those were
Yeah.
really big. I remember that.
But what about GoPro? If for some reason is still kind of a thing.
Still kind of a thing.
Yeah.
USB flash drives. That was from the 2000s.
I still have a couple flash drives I use from time to time.
I use tons of them.
Yeah.
Tons of them. So I mean, this list goes on, and there's obviously you can see that a lot of the technology has changed. That decade, the previous decade, would have been the last of the wired
Yes.
connected devices.
Well, actually, here's an interesting way to look at it. The big, well, it's not the biggest, but Windows XP, which was released in October 2001, had, half a dozen or a dozen big innovations, big things. One of them was Wi-Fi. It was integrated Wi-Fi capabilities. And back then, Wi-Fi networks were by and large unprotected. It would just connect automatically to any network that it could find. That was shown to be a huge problem, but over the next, over that 10-year period, that's when that transition to wireless happened. And when you emerge on the other end of it and look at the decade we're going to look at, I mean, it's all wireless,
Yeah, I think that's the big takeaway from the previous one. But we'll go back and forth, obviously, in comparison to
Sure.
what stands out. But if I were to ask, I mean, I have a little list here that I made.
Yeah, I do too.
So I'm going to ask you, when you talk about the 2010s, and I'm not saying this is the device of the decade, right? I'm not saying that per se, but when I think about a device that represented the 2010s, I would say it's the iPod, the iPad.
Really? See, I would not say that.
That would be and I'll tell you why.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm not saying due to importance. Yes, it had a tremendous important part of technology and the way that it shifted. But that is what comes to mind when I think the 2010s and an important device and something that kind of, it stays in my head to represent that decade,
I wonder.
I would say the iPad would have been the one for me that stands out as a very 2010s device.
Wow. See, I completely disagree with that.
Okay.
And
Tell me why.
I actually have two short lists, and one of them is a list of just a couple of things that I think were humongous in that decade and have long-reaching ramifications. They are pivots in time where it will never be the same again. But then I have another list where these things happened and they didn't take over the world, but I still think they're important, and I think they're going to head there. And I think the iPad is on that list because it was announced and released in 2010. It's literally, no, not literally, but will be soon, literally 10 years later. It didn't, well, it wasn't the only, well, no, you know what? See, I can't even say it. I was going to say, you can make the argument that it knocked 1/3 of the size of the PC market away, but actually, I don't think it did. I think the iPhone did most of it. That's the thing. I think that's why the iPhone is it for me, because, and when I say the iPhone, I really mean the smartphone, but the iPhone being the first modern smartphone and then everyone else following suit.
Well, the iPhone
I think
of
that
the 2010s was which one? It was the iPhone 4. That would have been a very important player, right?
Well, no. So
The 4 and the
yeah, but
4S.
if you go back to 2009, the iPhone had been out for 2 years. It was only on a couple of carriers still.
Yeah.
They had only released a couple models. They had just started the App Store the year before. It wasn't yet destroying the PC market. It wasn't yet taking over for Apple as its biggest moneymaker. It wasn't yet a humongous success. That all happened in the subsequent 10 years. And then, of course, Android took it to other heights as well. There were battles. This was the decade during which RIM and BlackBerry, Nokia, Motorola, although they're still kind of around, Palm, all disappeared basically because of the iPhone. And when you look at Apple today, compared to where they were 10 years ago, 70-something% of their revenues are from iPhone. I mean, it's the biggest economic engine that's ever been created in some ways. So the iPad to me is just an obvious follow-on to that, and it hasn't definitely not had the same impact, but it's on that other list because I think it's still like long-term. It is that car versus truck thing. I think it's the type of device that's probably going to be good enough or something like it for most people, where the PC becomes more like a workstation.
Well, here's kind of the reason why, right?
Mhm.
I think that it plays. I'm not saying it's an I do feel that on the level of importance, it made.
It's just a giant iPod. What's wrong with you?
I know it's just a giant. Wasn't that what you said when it came out?
Oh yeah.
The reason why I think that it has a real importance to the previous decade or the decade that just is ending is that aesthetically, it really changed the way we look at these type of devices. It played a very important part in the evolution of all of the essentially the entire PC industry with, having a slick metal look to something became the norm. And I think everybody else followed. And the fact that it was the only one out of all the tablets that survived. There was no tablet market. There's a PC market and there's an iPad market.
Yeah.
That's how I see this. Samsung couldn't do it. Google couldn't do it. No other OEM could do it. They were able to do it because they had the infrastructure. They have the ecosystem. And I don't consider the PC tablets because they're PCs at the end of the day. So it was able to compete in a non-existent market that they created and nobody else could follow. I think the long-term thing about the iPad, there's going to be a much bigger story here. I think if it wasn't for the iPad, we wouldn't have devices like the Echo Show. We wouldn't have devices like the Google Hub. I think the iPad made way for that.
Yeah, okay. So I'm not 100% sure I agree with all of that, but I will say that let's pretend everything
Paul,
you said is
agree with me.
Let's just say everything you said is true. But none of it is true unless the iPhone happens first, and I think the iPhone is the more important device by far.
Oh no, absolutely. Listen, the evolution of the iPhone is the big story here. The longevity of the iPhone is the big story here because when that iPhone came out, first of all, I held off from getting an iPhone. You know this, and I've discussed this over the last 10 years. I did not want an iPhone to be my everyday phone. It was not my everyday driver. I needed to stay out of that ecosystem because I knew it's so deep that once you go in it, it's difficult to come back out.
Yep.
It really is
It's
because
what I
everything's
call
tied.
a one-way dead end road.
It really is. It's the people that are able to do that jump from Android to iPhone. I don't know how they do that back and forth because
Well,
you're
from your experience with me that I do it poorly
well, you
because
do it
you'll
because
send
of
me a
work.
text message and it will end up on an iPad somewhere, even though I switched back to an Android phone. And that's one of those things that happens. Like it's hard. The Apple makes it hard on purpose.
Here's where I fall on this, and then for
Mhm.
some reason all my applications just opened up. I think the computer knows I'm talking about Apple and it's getting upset. I think that's what
Yep.
just happened. When you think about phones, what phone stands out in the decade for you right now? Top of your head. If I'm saying the 2010s, boom.
I would just say iPhone.
You know what I go to? iPhone 5. iPhone 5.
Oh, you mean a
iPhone,
specific?
yeah, specific phone that represents that era.
See, I think of it as more of a continuum. The thing that's fascinating about the iPhone was so much. I mean, honestly, we could spend the entire show just talking iPhone. Like one of the reasons that iPhone is so interesting is when it started, the iPhone was all about innovation, and Apple was first. They were doing stuff first. By the time the decade ended, Apple was like not even a fast follower; they were a slow follower. Like Apple became the safe company, and they wouldn't adopt technologies until they had completely nailed the user experience. Like they have typically been lagging behind. Like we see that
Yeah.
the latest example is with the move to 5G. I mean, they're just it's just the nature of it. So that shows you like how the iPhone matured over that period of time. I think the iPhone 4 was a disaster from a reliability perspective, but it's also an enduring design. And I think it was Steve Jobs who kind of compared it to like a Leica camera, if I'm not mistaken. And there's something to be said for that. It's actually hard to hold it in your hand because it's so sharp edged. And of course, now it's tiny, but so it's ludicrously small. But there's something about that design which is iconic. And the iPhone 5 you're referencing is basically a taller version of that, shared that design. Yes, I mean, iconic. I think they lost it a little. They lost the script a bit with the iPhone 6. I think those were kind of soft looking and not so interesting. And the iPhone 10, I mean, we can kind of debate, the pros and cons of that design, but the bigger trend there, which other companies are doing better, is the move to these all screen devices where literally the front of the device is just a screen. The camera maybe pops up or it's hidden under the glass or whatever it is. It's a fingerprint reader in the glass, or they use a camera for that kind of sign in stuff. Anyone who was familiar with the first gen iPhone would look at a modern smartphone and immediately understand what it was, but it is amazing how much those things have improved.
No, I agree with you
over time.
100%. Yeah, they have tremendously.
Yeah.
What else do you have? So I have another one on my list, and
Mhm.
and again, maybe this is not a popular opinion. I think the Surface Pro 3.
Oh,
played a
you're
v-
really specific. You're like
I
going
am.
right on specific
Yeah,
models.
I'm going very specific with my list. 'Cause,
You're also you seem to have your weird tablet obsession here for some reason.
I think it was the decade of the tablet. I think it made a
Yeah.
huge. I think it made a huge impact on the way that we use computers. Listen,
So I will give you.
I mean, I have a
say-
monstrous laptop here, but most people have a very thin, ultra portable device, and
Right.
Surface played a huge part in that.
Yeah. So again, I would, rather than be specific enough to a certain device, the way I look at this is the past 10 years have also been an interesting period for innovative form factors for PCs, right? And there's a bunch of different things. Like I think Microsoft with the Surface Pro 3 didn't really invent, but formalized that kind of tablet-based convertible PC design, which everyone copied. So obviously it's a big deal. I think you have to talk about the MacBook Air second gen and how an entire generation of Ultrabooks appeared because of that computer. There's some all-in-one designs I think that are really iconic. The iMac is an obvious example, but also something like the Surface Studio, which I realize hasn't sold particularly well, but the ability to grab the screen, pull it down, write on it, and everything, use the dial. It's it's incredible.
Yeah.
Multi-touch and pen kind of came into their own this decade everywhere except on the Mac. That's interesting, and I think the impact of the iPad and or the iPhone on the PC market can be seen in ways that we brought ideas forward from there, but also that a market that hadn't been innovating for a while suddenly realized they had to innovate to survive, and we reap the benefits as users of that. So I think, the PC market literally over that decade fell by 1/3, like 30%, 33% of it disappeared, right? So it's a smaller market, but the quality of the machines we have today and the quality of the systems we run, whether it's Mac OS or Linux or Windows, much higher than it was 10 years ago, much higher.
Yeah, overall build quality. What do you think
Yeah.
attributed to that? Do you think it was the fact that we've had almost a reference device by Microsoft and by even Apple for other OEMs?
No, I
to
think there was
follow?
an understanding on the PC side of the fence. It's always been a very low margin business. And what PC makers finally came to understand was something that Apple came to understand first was premium devices have higher margins and they can sell well enough to be a very successful business. And so HP has done a great job with their premium PCs. Microsoft basically only sells premium PCs. There are a few exceptions. Dell has premium PCs. Lenovo, obviously, the ThinkPad, especially the X1 line. Those are the, that's the part of the market that they can actually make money in. Gaming PCs is another example. And then Acer this past year has been innovating in a kind of a new area around premium PCs for creative types, where it's basically we want all the power of a gaming PC, but none of the noise and the fans and the stupid designs with all the lights and everything. Like we want something professional aimed at that particular market. So I just think it's and the market's falling. And so, we talked about HP Compact. That was kind of at the beginning of this. Actually, it was right before the market collapsed.
Well, how about HP's big mistake of the decade? They wanted to leave the PC business.
Yeah, that guy didn't last very long.
Yeah.
That was I think he was I can almost come up with his name. It was Lou something, or he was only there briefly. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that was a big mistake. For me, there's a bunch of devices that stand out. I think the ease of use, obviously 4G, big it made the concept that you
4G
have wireless.
Stepping stone to 5G, right? Which is going to be maybe one of the, we'll see what happens, obviously. But I mean, standing here on the cusp of the next century, the next decade, it seems like this is the start. We talked about wireless before this past decade. That wireless was really mostly about Wi-Fi. And now it's just global, pervasive, high-speed wireless. It's better than Wi-Fi.
Oh, you know what it is? So here's the thing. You had Wi-Fi and then you had the 4G boom, which was true high-speed mobile internet, right? Anywhere you go.
Mm-hmm.
5G story is not going to be the speed of 5G. I don't think that's the story of 5G. I think the accessibility is going to be, and I don't accessibility in the sense that you have access to it, not the other accessibility.
Well, I mean,
but the fact that you're going to have Internet of Things is going to become a key player in everything that we do, because you're going to have access to 5G.
I mean, one of the items I have on my list that I think was one of the big technologies of this decade is tied to this, the cloud computing, and we can kind of get into that. But for cloud computing to work, you have to have pervasive wireless, right? I mean, you have to have broadband. It's that, otherwise it doesn't make sense. And when I think of 5G, what I think of is, on 4G, a lot of people will stream music all the time. They don't think about it. It just works. And on 5G, the scenario is you're standing in line to board a plane and you're like, oh, I forgot to download a movie, and you just download it while you're standing in line, and it happens that fast, and that may not be a great or common scenario, whatever, a great example, but what it's indicative of is how everything changes when something like that is possible.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of hard to imagine, but cloud computing happened because of pervasive connectivity. What will happen because of pervasive 5G level connectivity? It's kind of hard, obviously more cloud computing, but I mean, it may be hard to imagine. 10 years ago, we were still arguing over whether cloud computing had a future.
I think we've done that conversation.
Yeah.
We've had that conversation on the air. And for long-time listeners, we have evolved For people
No.
that say Paul is stuck in his ways, I'm going to tell you, this was a man. Him and I
Sure.
would have entire shows about how we were, we were tagging our MP3s and storing
Oh,
our
dude, I got to
video.
tell you a story
Uh,
about this.
Even, I have to tell you something. I disconnected my home server that
Yeah.
I've had up and running. I mean, I've upgraded, but since 2005, I've had a server in my house
Right.
for photos, for documents, for media, for everything, and it's
Yep.
gone. I took it off.
Yeah,
I don't need
I
it
still
anymore.
have mine.
You do.
I don't use it for anything.
I know.
I mean,
That's-
I back up stuff to
disconnecting
it.
Disconnecting
Well,
it
for
is the big
for
one.
example, I mean, think about like I could look at it right now, and I don't have to actually look at it, but there's a folder on there for photos or pictures or whatever, and you go in, there's like a photo collection folder. I have all the photos I've ever scanned, all the photos I ever took through a certain time. But in the last few years, all the photos I've been taking are on smartphones. Those things are backed up automatically to OneDrive and to Google Photos. And sometimes I'll remember if I'm decommissioning a phone, I'll just offload the photos and throw them in there.
Yeah.
But I just went this past weekend. I made our Christmas card. That required me to go back and look at all the photos from the past year, and which I did, by the way, on Google Photos. And I had to go find the template I used to create the card, which was on the NAS. So I actually just accessed my NAS for the first time in
Just
forever.
for that.
And I don't have any photos from 2019. Basically, I actually
Amazing.
have a handful, but the 2019 folder is empty
Mm.
because it's somewhere else.
Yeah.
The world
It's-
has changed.
The world has really changed, and I think cloud computing that's become the discussion 10
Yeah.
years ago. We were doing the show. We would have been, how many terabytes do we need on our computers? Now the discussion is, I could get away with 256 and I'm good.
I could get away with 128.
128?
I very much could.
Yeah.
I use so many different computers every year because I review them and so forth, and I know exactly what I put on each system. Everything I do is in the cloud. Everything. I do this every day, Andrew. I mean, I work on this computer I'm using right now in my office. I'll go upstairs, open a laptop. I go to the folder I have all my stuff in I'm working on, bring up a document that I was working on. This happens every day. It does not matter what computer I have. If I get a new computer, the time from opening it for the first time to I'm fully up and running has dropped to under an hour.
Amazing.
And by fully up and running, I mean all my apps are installed, all my data is synced, everything I need is there. When I go to New York on Thursday, I don't know exactly which laptop I'm going to bring, but I can tell you this: I'm not going to do anything special to make it ready. I don't have to. It's all set. It doesn't matter which one I take. It's amazing.
So cloud computing for sure.
Yep.
The story of 5G is going to unveil the next decade, which is
Yeah, that's
interesting. 4G
next
for
decade.
sure.
Yep.
Streaming media.
Yes.
Would you say that that's probably the top?
I think of it as the death of
Change?
physical media, right? I don't know. For example, maybe you know more about this than I do, but audio CDs were a big thing, right? And they were they were the end of the line for physical media for music. Even though I know there were other formats, it doesn't matter. And I also know that some hipsters like to play turntables, whatever. Who cares? So the music is relatively low bandwidth compared to movies, right? So movies, TV shows, it's kind of a problem. I know that Blu-ray discs offer still quality that you can't get streaming apparently, but I don't think most people care. I also don't think most people need to own things, and that there are incredible vast libraries of content now available via, dozens and dozens of services, for everything from the Netflix type services that everyone has heard of, to the cord cutting services, to specialty services like Shudder if you're a horror fan, or Disney Plus if you like have kids and like kid content. There's all kinds of it's stuff for everybody. And the days when people used to have bookshelves full of books and CDs and cassettes and VHS tapes and DVDs and blah blah blah. It's not 100% gone, obviously. I know
Sure.
the people that hold out for that stuff, but this is the decade that all just that's just swirling around the toilet. It's just
Well, the fact
that's
that-
all going away.
The fact that we now, even early 2010s, right? The discussion was cord cutting. What are you going to do? It's not about and the concept was that you don't want to pay your cable bill anymore. That's not
Well, okay. funny you say that,
that's
Andrew.
what people wanted.
That was, but so here's what's happened. So I literally just wrote my year-end roundup about cord cutting. In some ways, cord cutting had a tough year in 2019, right? PlayStation Vue is disappearing. One of the top tier players. The prices have gone up multiple times because of the increased price of content, and also the same kind of bundling we see that screws over cable is occurring on these services. And then now there's complexity. Unfortunately, there's almost too many of these services. It's not just the TV services, it's all of the services. And so most people who want to cut the cord are going to have some combination of services, some number of services, and the number of them has gone up. It's kind of tough. Like if you want to watch like the new Star Trek show, you have to get CBS All Active or All Access, whatever it's called. If you want to watch Game of Thrones, you got to have HBO. Well, not anymore, but at the time you had to have HBO Now or HBO Go or whatever. These things, they add up. They can be expensive. And I've gotten this complaint from so many people because I've written so much about cord cutting who have said, I was so excited to get rid of cable. I got YouTube TV, or I got Direct TV Now, or I got PS Vue, whatever it was. And it was, when I got it, it was $35 a month, and then it was $40 a month, and it was 45, and then it was 50, and now it's 55. And it's like, basically, it's getting to the point where these things could cost as much as cable. So why bother, right? And the answer is, and maybe that's how cord cutting changed over the course of the decade, because cord cutting is just like anything else; it's inevitable. Our viewing habits have completely changed, or are in the process of changing. There's always going to be the old school people who like to show up in front of the TV with the remote and turn it on at 8:00 on Thursday and watch Friends or whatever. But hopefully not today. But the thing that saves cord cutting, the thing that makes cord cutting make sense, and will always make cord cutting make sense, is just the flexibility that you can go in and out of any of these services at any time without any repercussions. And if you're smart about it, if you don't mind a little bit hands-on management, you can say, this month, we're going to pay for Netflix. We're going to watch the hell out of Netflix. That's all we're going to do.
Yeah.
And when it's over, or maybe it's 2 months, whatever the time, it doesn't matter. We're going to cancel it, and we're going to do Hulu, or we're going to do Disney, or we're going to do Apple TV Plus, or we're going to do HBO Go, whatever it is. And we're going to watch the hell out of that thing. And then we're going to get rid of it. Or, this new season of Homeland's coming in February. We're going to get Showtime that month. And by the way, those things are often free for like the first week. This past year, my wife and I watched the then new season of Homeland for free, and then got rid of the service because we don't really want Showtime. So even, yes, the prices have gone up. It's bad. But cord cutting is here to stay, and this flexibility is what puts it over the top.
Yeah, no, I think the flexibility is the selling point here. But like, for example, like I have YouTube TV.
Mm-hmm.
They're the number one. Not only in my opinion, but I'm talking about quality. They're the number one live video, like as if it's cable streaming content. As far as quality goes, $55 a month. You know what? Now I'm like,
I know.
I don't want to pay $55 a month for this. And to be honest, the only thing I watch on there is wrestling regularly.
Yes, but you know what, Andrew?
That's all I'm watching regularly.
But so eventually, I suspect if you are a fan of wrestling in this case, or maybe you're a fan of the NFL, or a fan of NBA basketball, or whatever it is, the sports in general, you either can now, or I assume would be able to just pay for something that gives you that, And I think this is the viewing change I meant. So remember when cable TV arrived, probably in the 1970s or 80s, depending on where you lived, the big deal was the amount of channels you got, because before then we had at least in Boston, we had 3, what do you call them? VHF channels. Like, I'm confusing them. VHF channels. And then maybe 2 or 3 on UHF. And that was it. We had like 5 or 6 channels. Yeah. Cable arrived and we had like 100. It was amazing. Yeah. MTV, all this stuff. The bigger, just as big of an advance though, was the ability to record this stuff. And you could start watching shows on your own schedule, right? But shows still came out once a week. If you watch the X-Files back in the 90s, it was Friday night or Sunday night, I don't remember, whatever night, show would come on, there'd be commercials. If you taped it and watched it later, you could fast forward through that stuff. The other thing about cord cutting services, things like Netflix, especially, whatever, is they'll drop an entire season of a show or some set of episodes, whatever it is, at once. And this is a cliff you can't step back from. Like, once you go down this path, the notion of a show that is on live TV on a Thursday is ludicrous. The notion of a show that comes out online like The Handmaid's Tale, where they actually release one episode every week. Nope, ludicrous. Like that has to change. Like that will change. And I think that this is a one-way trip. We're not ever going back to the old way of doing things. It's only going to be more of this. And I realize Disney just came out, and Mandalorian comes out once a week, and Apple TV
Which,
stuff comes out once a week.
as someone, listen, as someone that's in ads and marketing, I would
Yeah.
say that there is more value in a
Mhm.
product when you release it weekly rather than dumping everything at the same time.
Well,
I think
Netflix would
there's
disagree with you.
Netflix
So,
does. No, Netflix does disagree, but
yeah,
they don't have ads on their shows.
right.
There's
Right.
no advertising on Netflix, and their entire model is
Well,
based
that's
on.
how this model is going to change, right? In other words,
But what happens when they cap out? When they're capped, and they're seeing that there's an issue. You know what? What if you released a series with a limited, a sponsored by weekly?
well, okay, but remember, like go back to the days of cable. Go back to the must-see TV Thursday night thing, right? Thursday night, if I remember correctly, I think it was like Friends and
Seinfeld.
Seinfeld, and then there were two other shows.
Mad About You.
Depending on the year, they were usually crap, but sometimes they were okay. And if they were really good, they would probably separate them out and put them somewhere else in the schedule because they need those tentpole shows to attract. But they would always be the crap. The beauty of the Netflix model is you can only watch the good stuff. And if you start down a path where like, oh, this series isn't that good, you just move on. You know, that's what I mean. I feel like as a viewer, you can't go back from that. It's just too good. Now, obviously, something like Netflix, when they get humongous, not every show can be as good as Narcos. Not every show is going to be as good as, what else do they make? I don't know, whatever their other great shows are. Like it's like when you watch the first couple of like European or English crime dramas like Broadchurch or something, you're like, holy crap, this is amazing. They're all going to be this good. No, they're not. Like you saw the best one, unfortunately. Of course, that's the one they give us first. But I think one of the nice benefits of what has happened, and it's still transitioning, it's still happening, is just the quality of TV has gone up dramatically. We used to basically have to turn to HBO to watch The Sopranos or Deadwood or Rome or whatever those great shows they had were. And now those kinds of shows, those level of shows, they're on Amazon, they're on Hulu, they're on Netflix. Disney and Apple are trying. We'll see how that goes. But it's what an amazing switch over that is. I don't have to watch Alf anymore, or Mork and Mindy, or Laverne and Shirley, or whatever. I don't have to watch like crap. I have a choice now, and I think a lot of people are going to choose quality.
It is quality and it helps. I'm curious to see how we get out of this decade when it comes to content. Listen, here's the other thing. Another big story of this, and this is something that I do.
Mm-hmm.
I stream on all these services. This
Right.
was very difficult to do 10 years ago, what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And the fact that we're able to, you're sending an HD signal to me, and I'm able to kind of put this together, and I built a studio in my house, and we're now streaming on a number of platforms,
Right.
and you have the Twitch streaming happening, and you have all these services happening.
yeah.
I think
Here's
this
the
is a
throwback
huge
for you.
story.
This is off the top of my head, so I'm gonna get some of these details wrong, and I don't remember the year. But when Apple came out with something that was called, it was like the iPod, with photos or something.
iPod
Remember that?
video?
It was before they could do photos. It was color. It had a color screen. You could look at photos on it, and then eventually they added video too. They added to the iTunes store the ability to buy and rent TV shows.
Oh, yeah.
And at the time, the only way you could get it on a TV was to buy a dock for that iPod that would connect to your TV with probably RCA cables. The TV content that you bought from Apple that first year was 320 by 240. It was, I don't know if it was before H.264. I think it was. It might have even been, I don't remember the format. I guess that part doesn't matter. Yeah, it was MPEG-4 of some kind, probably, whatever it was. The quality was terrible. The show, it was the year that Lost debuted. And I remember that because I bought the first episode of Lost
2007?
so I could take screenshots and test it. And I actually became hooked on Lost because I watched the intro to Lost several times in the process of recording what it looked like. And of course, the first episode Lost was like a movie. It was incredible. But I mean, that's how much things have changed. I mean, when you buy content from Apple today, I don't know TV shows per se, but most of the movies you're going to buy today, the new movies are going to be 4K, UHD, HDR. You know, you buy them with a remote on your Apple TV, and away you go, and it just starts the special features. You know, you know, they're not alone in all that. Of course, I know it's not just Apple, but I mean, when you think about that, 320 by 240, it's like the resolution of a postage stamp, you know, compared to like 3840 by whatever it is, 2160, whatever 4K is. I mean, it's incredible. It's more than 10. It's a 15 times 15x resolution increase or something like that. It's crazy.
What else do you have on your list? Anything else?
The other big
gotta-
thing I have, and I don't know if the right term for this is gig economy. I think it is, but it's the Airbnb, Uber, Lyft type stuff, the sharing economy.
Yeah.
I realize that from a business plan perspective, there are some issues here. I realize that there are absolutely some safety issues in all of those things I just mentioned, for sure. But this is going to transform the world. You live in New York City, and so you understand how taxis work. I mean, a lot of people in other part of the countries might not, but I knew a guy who owned a taxi, and I knew the crazy hoops you had to jump to get into this business and the expense of getting that badge that goes on your car. It's like you're buying your way into the mafia. And whatever you think of, Bob has a Sentra, and now he can drive people around in his own car. I really feel like this stuff is going to fundamentally change the way that these markets work.
Where do you see it headed? How do you see that evolving beyond what we have?
So, I mean, obviously there's been challenges around, well, two things, like I said, safety and money, right? And so a lot of people kind of scoff at a company like Uber or Lyft and think like this thing is not sustainable. I actually wonder how it's not sustainable. To me, it seems like it's obviously sustainable, but I mean, whatever the reality is. I look at this like these businesses, Airbnb and Lyft, Uber, etc. Whether or not they are successful in their own right will still have massive ramifications on the markets they compete in, right? And I think basically it's just going to impact the quality, the cost, and the availability of the other options, right? And so I don't know, you probably know this. I mean, I don't know how it works in New York City, but I know when we go to Europe, for example, there's an app we can get for taxis, and it works just like Uber and Lyft, right? Except that what you're calling is a taxi. But it's the same thing. Like, I mean, how would you hail a taxi if you wanted to take a taxi from your home in suburban Queens
okay.
and go to the airport? You would call someone on a phone.
You would call a cab
Right.
service. Yeah.
Well,
or
maybe
you-
not today
yeah.
you wouldn't, but I mean, 5-10 years ago you would.
No,
Today,
I would call the cab
You
company.
would
I
actually
would call.
get on a phone and make a phone call like an Amish person.
Today,
And like today there's an app for that. There's an app for that. And
I still
think-
stick my leg out on the side of the highway to catch a
Yes.
ride. That's how I do. That's how
Yes,
I
and
hail a cab.
Yep. I think that stuff is huge, and it's ongoing. We're not there yet necessarily in some ways. Although I rely very heavily on Lyft and Uber when I travel for work, especially. New York City. I mean, you don't call an Uber or Lyft in New York City. You just walk out on the street. I mean, there's cabs everywhere. But
You know what? There are times that I still call an Uber and Lyft in the city.
okay,
There are moments.
Well,
there are
to
moments
get
that I
around the
do
city,
that.
you mean? Yeah. Okay. All right.
Here's a good example. If
Mhm.
I want to go home, right?
Yep.
If I want to go back to Queens, back to Bayside,
Yeah. Like
I'll call an
you
Uber.
can't- Yes. Yes.
because I don't want to sit in a stinky taxi
Right.
for 40 minutes.
Right, but I think this is one of the things that Uber and Lyft could have a positive impact on is the quality of taxis, right? I think when people get used to, I mean, look, I know there are exceptions to this. We've had bad Airbnb experiences, and I guess technically speaking, I've had a couple of bad Uber type experiences. But I mean, as far as like the quality of the vehicle, regardless of what you think of the car, I mean, like the kind of car it is, but the cleanliness of it and whatever, it's always been pretty high. It's always been really good. Taxis is like, it's like a public urinal with wheels sometimes. Like it's,
you know what it is. It literally, you're not even
Yeah.
literally. I do think that the share ride and all that stuff, that model, I don't know how sustainable it's going to be in this decade. I
Right.
don't know what it evolves to. I know Uber's big plan is to have self-driving
Yeah.
Ubers all around the city. I don't know
Yeah.
if that's, in 10 years, Paul, God willing, if we're still doing this, maybe
So
that's
we're
the
talking about
discussion
the
we're
flying
having.
cars or whatever.
Autonomous
Self-driving cars.
vehicles. Yeah, autonomous vehicles. And by the way, there is something to be said because this was the decade of electric cars. It did happen.
That's still in the transition thing, but
But
yeah,
I
it
mean,
certainly is the
it's
decade when it started
affordable.
happening for sure.
They're affordable. They're
Yep.
limited to get, but it's affordable. The
Right.
Chevy Volt was going to be the answer to this.
Right.
Fell flat on its face. Didn't work out. But Tesla's proven that they're putting out $35,000 vehicles, and now Nissan has one. Luxury brands now have one. Ford has a Mustang SUV now coming out
but
this year for 2020.
The move to self-driving cars is going to be a lot like the move to cloud computing. There's going to be a lot of pushback in the beginning. People, especially in the United States, I bet, because we just don't have the population
Well, this
density
is the
of
new
like
this is the
Japan
new
or Europe.
manual versus automatic. versus
Yes, and it's
standard.
going to
This
be,
is
you are not taking this thing away from me. This is about my freedom, blah blah
Mhm.
blah, whatever. Like, and there's going to be pushback, and that
Tremendous.
will last for some period of time, but it's inevitable. And
Well, let's see. How long did the manual versus standard argument last, right? Because obviously it's
Li-
not as much now,
listen,
but
first of all,
You're
it
talking
didn't end,
30
Andrew.
years.
I'm not.
you still driving standard, Paul?
No, we don't have a standard right now,
But you were. I mean, you had the Volkswagen.
well, I
right?
have had
Wasn't that
standards
manual?
my whole life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I always drove a stick.
Automatic versus standard. I mean, that discussion is
If you have to
happening,
commute to
but-
work every day, you don't want a stick.
no.
You
But
know,
listen, when
a
the Chevy
stick is a
Corvette,
luxury for someone who likes to drive and doesn't drive that much.
my father said this once to me, and now it makes sense. He goes, "You know when it's over for manual? When the Corvette's not manual anymore. That's
Yeah.
it for manual cars. And you know what? It's not manual anymore, and
Hey,
it's a
listen,
mid-engine car.
30 years ago, most Porsches sold were automatics. I remember my dad bought a little Volkswagen convertible, and it was like an automatic. I'm like, seriously? What? Like what? Why do you? I mean, what power is this thing? Bubbles? What do you like? Do you pedal it? Like what? Why would you not get a stick?
Disposable tech. How everything is disposable now. You don't hang on to
Yeah.
anything more than 2-3 years.
That's a bad thing, though.
Yeah,
You know?
that's a thing from this decade that we saw more and more of. People are buying. The fact that people are buying new TVs every 3 years is baffling. And I'm not. By the way, I hang on to my TVs. I held on to get a 4K TV. I just got one about 6 months ago.
Right.
This is fascinating how a TV was something you hung on to until it broke, and
Oh my
now
God. Of
you're
course.
replacing them every 3 years, or there's a reason to replace them. I'm not saying you should. I'm saying there's a reason now. People are throwing different standards and different quality improvements.
Well,
That's another big
things
story.
don't last as long, for one thing, right? I mean, the washing machines, the refrigerators, the TVs, and whatever that my parents had could still be in service today. The stuff that you and I bought as adults, pretty, electronics and things that are electronic in some way. Like we have a Samsung washing machine and dryer, and we just got an Instapot. And the one thing that those things have in common is that they sing little songs.
Yes,
Like when the wash is done, we're treated to a
jingle.
little melody of some kind. I don't know why it does that, but so that's fun. But I don't think that thing's going to be around in 10 years. I really don't.
Interesting, right? No, definitely not.
No.
Anything we miss here? Obviously 4K.
So I
big
do. I
story.
just to blow through it quickly. There are the things that, like I said, we're kind of at the start of. I don't think they define the decade, but this decade was the time that this started happening. And so we mentioned cord cutting. That was definitely one of them. Wearable computing is definitely. And by the way, 10 years from now, we'll be talking about computing being more common. That's embedded in our bodies somehow. Eye transplants or whatever, ear, inside the ear type stuff, whatever it is under the skin. That will be the
embedded
natural
computing.
Embedded, whatever you want to call that.
Yeah.
And then the beginning of ambient computing through smart speakers, smart displays, smart home technology of all kinds, where you can say to a voice assistant, turn the lights on, or run some routine where lights come on all over your house, the shades go up, the music starts, whatever it is, the heat comes on. this transition is to me is like any transition in housing where things were added after the fact because they were invented after the house was built, like electricity or plumbing, like,
It's my house.
yeah, well, I
it
mean,
wasn't built with electricity.
if your house is old enough, I mean, this stuff was retrofitted. Today people are retrofitting, Ethernet, smart switches and lights of all kinds, smart devices of all kinds. The houses of the future, the near future, will be built with that stuff as an integral part, right? And sometimes they still are. I mean, they are already, right? I mean, I'm sure a lot of homes are built with Ethernet, right out of the ground or whatever. But I think that's, again, it didn't happen fully, and we're not living in this new age of this stuff, but it's happening. Like it's on the way. That stuff's happening.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I mean, I would just give a quick message or a quick mention to something related to the content stuff we were talking about earlier on, with cable TV versus cord cutting and so forth. There's more to life than that, right? We're not always sitting in front of a big screen watching a show with our spouse or whatever. We're out in the world and we listen to like podcasts, like you and I are making a podcast.
Yeah.
Back in the day, radio was just like TV was. You had some number of choices. The quality and reception varied on your location, also the time of day. I always, as a child, you may have had this experience. I always wanted, like, you'd be in the car with your parents or something. You go into a store, and the song comes on the radio that you liked, but then they had to turn off the radio, and you had to go in the store. And I always wanted that song to be ready to play again when I got back. But it was live, and now we have this incredible range of opportunity for content, like audio content, I guess I'll call it. And so whether it's audiobooks or a podcast, and podcasts have evolved in ways that I find incredible. I listen to a lot of like documentary style serial podcasts, which are sort of like to audio what like the Netflix stuff is. They're like high quality, well produced, really well researched, maybe true crime or history or some other kind of documentary type subject. I think that stuff's really cool. I know it's not as, it's not like space technology or whatever, but I think it's an interesting indication of how things that were kind of like niche-y, nerdy kind of things have gone mainstream and have really matured and become really interesting for like basically everybody.
Podcast for sure. I definitely put that in the category, right? I'm curious how that changes. I predicted 10 years ago that the story of podcast is not going to be you and me. It's going to be be NBC and CBS and ABC and the big networks.
Yeah, it's heading there,
ripping their teeth. And you know what? That's happened.
It's like it's like when the big breweries buy craft brew companies, right? Because all of a sudden they're like, oh, this other thing is taking money away from us.
We should have sold out 10 years ago, Paul.
Remember the idea I had? I still think this is such a freaking fantastic idea. Like, you're watching sports, right? So you're watching like Fox Sports. You want to watch football. Joe Buck is on. I want to murder that guy. I cannot stand him. The sound of his voice makes me just want to like claw my ears out. I want to replace Joe Buck. Actually, I'll just end the sentence there. But what I would like to be able to do, what I think we should be able to do, is have local guys doing what is essentially a podcast. It's like a live riff of like they're watching the game too, but they're talking.
Alternate feed.
Yeah. I still think that's like the greatest idea.
Listen, it may happen.
I don't know how that hasn't happened.
Well, I would love that to happen.
How was our national rage at Joe Buck not resulted in alternate broadcasts?
Nobody likes him. He's like the mayor of New York. Nobody likes him, but everybody tolerates it.
I will say the one thing I respect about that guy, and it is literally the only thing, I think it's on his Twitter feed. Like if you go look at him on Twitter, he says his tagline is, "I like every team but yours." It's good.
That's actually really funny.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah, he knows he's an idiot. Perfect. He knows it. All right, guys. That's it for this week. Let's wrap it up. We're going to do What to Talk if you're watching live. I'll continue this discussion with Paul. Maybe we'll do stuff that we don't like from this decade. Things that we absolutely hated. My dog is here. He's hanging out. We'll talk about that. If you're watching live, stay tuned. If not, you could join our Patreon, patreon.com/whatthetech. You could go there. And here, go. Why don't you go, Spencer? What do you want? There he goes. He's out of here. You could go there and check us out, and we do extra bonus content. For all things Paul, go to therot.com. Paul, I'm going to see you on Thursday, correct?
Yes, you are.
Perfect. It'll be fun. I got a busy day that day. I got a very busy day.
I'm not sure how busy my day is, but
No,
I'll
but
be
it's
around.
definitely incorporated. I'm including you in it. So absolutely love it. Thursday's going to be a fun day. All right, guys, that's it for this week. We'll see you all later. Take care. All right.
Oh,
I got
boy.
a big story here.
What? I mean,
Let me just
what does
do
this mean?
Yikes. I made a boo-boo. All right, I need a second before we begin. Share that. Let me just share this. Okay. One more thing I got to do. Sorry, Paul.
All right.
All right. One more thing here.
You could spend $53,000 on a Mac Pro.
I saw that. I want to get your opinion on that. Why? Nobody's
Well,
ordering. Why? Why is that even a
I
possibility?
don't think it's it's not even a workstation product. It's literally for like Weta and Lucasfilm or whatever, ILM. I don't know.
Okay. All right.
I don't get it.
All right. Let me change this. Where am I going? There we go. And we'll begin in 3, 2, and 1. Everybody, welcome to What the Talk. This is our bonus show we recorded live each and every week, exclusively on patreon.com/whatthetalk. I'm Engineer, and of course, I'm joined by Mr. Paul Thurrott. How you doing, Paul?
Pretty good.
The year's almost over.
Mm-hmm.
We did some of the stuff from the decade that stood out to us
Right.
on this week's episode, but I want to get your opinion on some. And by the way, we are going to do our best of and worst of coming up because I know everybody looks forward to our best of and worst of. So next week, let's do. You want to do best of first, or do you want to combine it because the following week is the break?
What's happening?
Okay, so we have to do our best of and worst of. Okay.
Oh, I see. Because the 24th is Christmas Eve,
Yes.
and the 31st is New Year's Eve.
Yes. So.
Yep. I see what you're
Maybe
saying.
we combine it this year.
Okay.
Let's do the best and worst of 2019 in one. Maybe we could drink that day. Just get all our gimmicks in.
Yeah.
Let's get them all in.
Oh,
But
boy.
we did do
day drinking is I'm getting a little old for day drinking, Andrew. But
What, I'm not?
I don't know.
What, I'm not getting too old for day drinking? I will figure it out, but we have to do our best of worst stuff, and then our prediction show, and then I think it would be fun to do, just to do more of these midway through the year coming up. But we did do our top stories of the decade almost, things that just stood out, nothing official, no order.
Yeah.
But how about stuff that failed?
Right. Things that were
this
bad.
decade? Things that were bad.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot. That were bad that have maybe gotten overlooked. A lot of these companies had major failures, major failures. We could talk about Windows Phone on how that failed, and it got very unique concept as far as the design went, but their failure came at. By the end, it was the right product and the wrong time. That's how I see it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I Windows. Everyone who cares about Windows Phone has their own little theories about why it failed. But ultimately, the reason it failed is because they were late to market, and the value proposition that they were offering, which was huge for users, was not great for brands. They had that notion of hubs and that you as a user shouldn't have to think, well, okay, I want to share a photo. So what's the name of that app I use for photos, and where is it on my home screen, and what does it look like? And they were like, look, we're going to have a thing called pictures. We're going to have a thing called music and video. We're going to have a thing called games. We're going to make this user centric. It was a very innovative and user centric view that just didn't fly with the companies that had to make it fly, which was the Facebooks of the world, the Googles of the world, et cetera. All the people that had the content services of their own wanted you to think of their brands, not of Microsoft's user-friendly, thing. And so it's too bad. It's too bad.
Yeah, I think they're one. How about the Fire Phone? People forget that Amazon had a phone. That
I'm surprised they never did a second try on that. There were some innovative ideas in the Fire Phone. I still have one around here somewhere. I think it's in my cellar now, but
it was kind. You know what it was? It was the intent. They released the phone that I would have predicted all the OEMs running Android were going to release. The core was Android, and they would have had their own spin on it, and a real specific spin. I mean, the Fire Phone.
They certainly have the market power to make it work.
It's
amazing.
What do you think? What do you think it was? It was just that they didn't have enough effort.
What's weird about it is they just gave up. The weird thing isn't that the first one sold poorly. It's that they just gave up. I still don't quite understand that. This is a company that since has proven very serious about this ambient computing market, for lack of a better name. They're blowing Google out of the water with the number of things that they release and all the side products that are compatible with it. I mean, it's an astonishing ecosystem. That they weren't able to make a phone fly is very interesting to me. I mean, obviously, the phone market is very particular. You have to deal with the carriers. There's all kinds of middlemen in the form of chip makers and service makers that have, you have to have buy-in from. And I'm sure it was more difficult than they imagined. But, we look at the Fire Phone and we think about it's kind of, remember had that kind of weird 3D thing you could do? You were holding it and it would, the buildings would kind of look like they were popping out of the phone or whatever. Whatever. I think that was a kitschy kind of end user feature, but I think the difficulty there probably had something to do with aspects of the market that most people just don't understand, that they quickly came to realize oh, this is actually a much bigger problem than we thought it was.
Yeah, I think the Fire Phone by the way, not a great device, right? It had a number of problems. It was slow, it was sluggish, it had all these issues. But the concept of what Amazon did with Android is what the market was predicting would happen to Android. This, having Google running a vanilla version of Android, and then Samsung, I would have anticipated would have done his own spin, but I guess it was the market dictated and said, we don't want customization. We don't want you to have your own version. We just want Android. And they tried to put as little spin as they could get away with, or as much spin as they could get away with when it came to the operation of this device. But Amazon said, F that. We're going to make this look totally different.
Yeah.
And you're going to like it. I don't know. Do people... Here's the question. If you really think about success, we were talking about tablets. The Kindle tablets, they've sold tons of these things. I just don't know if anybody's using them. I think people just buy them for people and nobody uses them.
I think about them a lot. I actually research these things fairly often.
You said that like it's like a family going through some troubles.
Yeah.
I think about them. They're in my thoughts a lot.
No, I don't mean, I mean for me. They're just too low end for me. They're so low rent.
But they're low end
they
for
make
everybody.
a 7, an 8, and a 10. The 10 was just revved. It might be the only one that has decent innards at this point.
They're all impossible, Paul. I'm going to tell you, my kids got one a year ago as a gift from somebody, and they don't even want to pick it up. And one's a 4-year-old, and she says it doesn't work, and she's absolutely right. It's slow, it's sluggish, it doesn't.
Right. So I think what people see is a $49 starting price, and they're like, "Well, I'll take a chance on this thing." And it's just I don't think it pans out for most people. I know I'm going to hear from the people that love them, but I'll just say that I really do look at this stuff a lot. I think about it a lot. I mean, I'm interested in it, and I am. It's fascinating to me that it hasn't gone better. But of course, their experience with e-readers and then tablets is what informed their phone thing, and they made a business of it. I mean, it seems like the phone could have worked. It didn't.
Here's something that I predicted that was sent to me by somebody that I predicted
Mhm.
that would happen by the end of the year this year, and it did not happen.
Okay.
So last year was all about the rise of these, like that. What do you call the hub or the Facebook, portal and the Kindle and the Amazon show? What are
Well,
what is
those
the
are
definition?
smart displays.
Smart displays. Okay, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
my brain just stopped.
Yeah.
Um, I was predicting that Apple would have some sort of software where
Mhm.
when you dock this thing, it becomes a smart display. It becomes your iPad, but with a very different
Yeah.
interface
I
when
mean,
you
a lot
dock
of
it.
people do that, right, with phones and tablets. Amazon does that with the Fire
Amazon does it,
tablets.
yeah. Amazon does it. There's a
Mhm.
couple phone
Google does
manufacturers.
it in a way with their Pixels. If you have their
Yeah.
wireless charger, it does a little ambient mode or whatever.
So I have the Google Hub. I have the Nest Hub in my kitchen. I have the small one, which is,
Yeah.
by the way, I love that thing.
Okay.
I love that thing because I got the Nest, I got the doorbell, I got the their version of the Ring.
Yep.
I'm getting the security cameras, the Nest
Mhm.
security cameras, the IQ, the
Mhm.
4K, whatever it is, the top one. And the fact that I could have when the doorbell rings, it just shows up on that display, freaking great. I can see everything there.
Sure.
Awesome. That's what I want. I
Now,
am
if only you had
surprised.
flushable toilets, your home
Oh.
would be truly modern.
Only if I had flushable toilets and electricity, it'd be perfect.
Yep.
I'm surprised Apple hasn't jumped into that.
I'm a little surprised that Apple hasn't done a lot of things when it comes to the home market, the smart home market. I feel like they're relying on third parties, but for example, was it a year ago, 2 years ago when they released the HomePod? How would they not have more of those things? How do they not have smart displays? How do they not have little hub type devices
Well,
that
that
I don't understand?
for them, it would be an easy transition because they don't even need a smart display.
Well,
All
but
they
they have a
need is an
built-in market.
iPad.
This is the
Yeah.
affluent families that buy Apple products who would want to have professional installers come in and put Apple equipment into their home. This is a natural fit. It's perfect. It's bizarre to me that only Amazon, among those kind of ambient platform makers, has really just been on the ball when it comes to releasing peripherals and services and stuff. It's incredible how many things they've released. Google has really dropped the ball. Microsoft is non-existent. Samsung talked about a Bixby smart speaker over a year ago,
Mhm.
still hasn't released it. That's just one speaker. I don't know what these guys are doing.
Maybe there's no
I
money
I
in the
don't
market. Maybe
understand
they're
it. It's
smart
like
enough
you're
to realize that there's no money in this market.
Yeah, well, then stop talking about it. You don't participate. Just leave. We don't
Yeah.
need you.
We don't need you. Leave.
No, I mean, I feel like look, Google or Apple has that built-in market, like I keep saying. I mean, that will always be there, regardless of the quality of Siri. If it's good, bad, or indifferent, I don't even care. It doesn't matter. It exists. It's fine. It's a lot of people, and then obviously Google and Amazon. I mean, the rest of it, it's like there's no need for anything else.
Yeah.
I
I think there's the discussion to be had. Listen, maybe 2020 is going to be their year that they do this. It's quite a possibility. But there is something interesting to be said about the fact that they haven't entered this market.
Yeah.
They have one of the best smart displays available in many people's homes. Why couldn't they just have an adapter that does what they're looking to do? I would love to dock my iPad and give
Yeah.
it some new life.
I mean, I don't use this, but you probably know. I mean, on your iOS device or whatever kind, there's a home app, which is like the HomeKit app or whatever, and it's like a dashboard or whatever. You know, Google offers something similar through their Google Home app, and the idea there is that you have these disparate systems. You might have like Philips Hue lights, and then you might have like you said, Nest security cameras and doorbells and stuff like that. And the way you would manage those things typically is you go to different apps for each one, but
Mhm.
HomeKit or Google Home or whatever Amazon has, I don't know how the Alexa app probably. um, offers you like a central place to do that stuff, right? You can do it all in one place. And like this, that's kind of it's a good idea, but this is a lot like that hub thing that Windows Phone was trying to do, where um, it doesn't always seem to work as well. Like I know through the Google Home app, like my options for controlling my lights are fairly minimal compared to what's possible in the Philips Hue app. And it's like, well, it'd be nice if this was all in one place. And you can still set up routines and everything. Like that still kind of works, but it's not really the hub that it has promised to be, at least not on the Google side. So I'm not sure on the Apple, maybe Apple's better. I don't know, but it seems like that display, which is fairly attractive, would be a natural for like a little controller that you'd have in your living room or kitchen or something, like a smart display, actually, right? Like an Apple branded, it's like a tablet with a base, or they could just give you a base and you can use an iPad for it, which actually be the smarter way to do it.
Let's see what else we have here. Stuff that we failed. What would you say failed? What else?
Well, I mean, so obviously, the big failure of the past decade has been every single company that makes phones that isn't Apple, right? Apple, we said this earlier, but they put RIM, which is BlackBerry. They're still in business, I realize, but put them out of business, put them out of the smartphone business. Nokia out of the smartphone business. I realize they're back. It's not the same thing. Motorola, I realize they're still around. Palm, gone. They steamrolled an entire industry. Now there are other companies that have risen up to face this challenge. Samsung, obviously, Huawei, some other Chinese phone makers, and
HTC
the market
is falling
is what it is.
apart.
Yeah, I mean, HTC shouldn't even exist anymore. LG shouldn't be in this market anymore. Maybe they'll consolidate their way out. I bet they will. So, like that to me is the failure of any company to respond adequately to the iPhone, except for Google, right, with Android, is astonishing to me, because there were established players. I mean, RIM was the biggest maker of smartphones in North America. Nokia was the biggest maker of smartphones elsewhere in the world. And those companies, again, they're not literally gone, relax, but they're gone. Like they're gone. And they are never challenging Apple ever again. They're just not.
Which is
It's amazing.
fascinating.
It's amazing.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
that part
that's
is
the big one.
Really
that's the
fascinating
big one.
To me.
The PC market has fallen 30%, like I said earlier, over the past decade. I think that's very interesting. It's also fair to say the PC market did not disappear, right? So all of the PC is dead kind of stuff is a little premature. I mean, something that is a PC will probably be around for quite some time. I mean, I think we're going to, whether you're a developer or an engineer, scientist, a programmer, a gamer, whatever it is, like PCs have life left. There's no doubt about it. But the PC market has not failed, but has declined precipitously this past decade, and is a very different market than it was 10 years ago, for sure.
Yeah, I think there's a major. Well, here's a thing for you. I have a question for you. The big story 10 years from now, we're doing this. What is it?
Well, we might have touched on some of it. I mean, autonomous cars, the embeddable computing device. I mean, there are people right now who, I don't know if it's Finland or Denmark or wherever, you can get a chip embedded in your hand where you can use it to go through the subway, right? And so it's, think about like the levels of convenience. Like when I grew up, Boston had for their subway, the MBTA had you would buy tokens.
Yes,
they
we
were
had it here.
like coin-like things. You put tokens into a machine like it was the 1920s. Like that persisted through the 90s, at least. I don't remember it, but eventually they went to a system that DC has had since the late 70s or 80s, where you get like a card with a stripe on it, and you can reapply money to it or just buy a new one. Eventually, you get the hard cards. Eventually, they're kind of tap and go. People can leave them in their wallet maybe and tap the wallet, and that works. So they can bump their their butt against it, and that will work sometimes. Like there's levels of convenience. Eventually, it's a smartphone thing. If you've got a tap and go system, you can do that. But just having it be part of your body, I mean, that makes sense for the company who's selling you this too, right? Because this is something now you can't share it.
Here's a Rossi in Winnipeg asks in the chat. He made a statement, but I'm going to ask you: do you think there's going to be a bump in the PC industry when Windows 7 is killed off in January?
No.
Does you don't think we're going to see any kind of bump, or it's
No.
already happening?
There's no way. No,
Whatever
because
it's
it's
gonna get.
see that transition has actually been happening. Like we've already seen Microsoft and the PC makers have already partially reaped the benefits of it. But over the next 3 years, I mean, there might be a small bump from businesses that are finally going to upgrade after paying for extra support. But no, we're not going to. The PC market doesn't bounce back. I mean, if anything, what this will do, the most this will do, is help level off the market for a couple of years before the decline just continues again. Like it's still net negative, like
Yeah.
it's still going down. But the problem for the PC is, especially for individuals who are going to ride this thing out and say, well, I don't need another PC. I don't care if it gets updated. I just need it for printing sometimes or whatever the task is. And then eventually it dies. I bet the majority of those people don't buy anything to replace it. They won't need to,
Interesting. They've already passed.
Some of them
gone past
will
it.
buy a PC. Some will buy a Mac. Some will buy a Chromebook. Some will buy an iPad. But I bet the majority of them don't buy anything. I bet they just won't see the need. You mentioned a NAS, right?
Mhm.
Something that's a little bit like a NAS in that it seemed really important a few years ago and suddenly doesn't anymore. Is a printer. Like people just don't need this anymore.
Don't have printers anymore. Yeah.
Used to be like, well, I need a printer because I have to print like an airline pass twice a year, or I'm gonna go to a concert and I want to print that out. No one thinks, not no one. I mean, I know I keep saying things like I don't mean literally. But some
Most
do it.
people, yeah.
Most people are like, I got my phone. Here you go. I'm getting on the plane. I'm getting in the concert. I'm, whatever that thing was that required us to print in the past. For most people, that stuff's just going away.
A lot of this stuff is going away, Paul. I'm curious to see what we see over the next 10 years. Everything, it's gonna be nuts. I'll have teenagers by then.
I think I told you this story before,
Nuts.
but this is just so beautiful and so representative of this conversation, which is that my daughter, when we lived in Dedham at the old house, went across the street, was hanging out with the girl who lives across the street, and they have it's kind of like a playroom above the garage or next to the garage or whatever it is, and they had stored an old rear projection TV in there. And so my daughter saw that. It's a hulking, huge thing, like as you remember. And she said, "What's that?" And the mother said, "Oh, that's a TV set." And she says, "What's all that stuff behind it?" Because to my daughter, a TV was she was born in 2001. She probably only really became aware of TVs. By the time she did, we had a plasma TV or whatever we had, and we moved on from there. TVs to her are these thin things you hang on the wall like a picture.
And they had like an actual TV.
And they had, remember, rear projecting TVs were humongous. There were literally mirrors in there and, whatever. I mean, it was like a big thing. In fact, in our basement, there's a hole in the wall in the room downstairs because my father built it so he could push his rear projecting TV into it and it would appear to be flat.
Interesting. Yeah.
That's what this stuff's all going to seem like. People, we make these jokes like, we'll look at a cassette, like, what is it for? Or like, what does it do? Or like, here's some millennials. Let's have them figure out how a turnstile or a turntable works. Or, a printer is going to be like that. Like, what is this thing? Like, you're looking at it, you're like, what is this? It's like a screenshot, but it's on paper for some reason. Like, it's going to seem weird,
It's well, to a lot of people, it's going to be weird. To other people, that's all they're going to know, which is going to be amazing.
Well, those people are old.
Yeah. All right, Paul, let's wrap it up for today. Thank you. This was a lot of fun. We'll be back next week. Thursday, maybe, Paul. Next week, I got a crazy week. Maybe Thursday. We'll figure it out.
Okay.
That work for you? All right, guys. I'll see you next time. Take care. Yeah, maybe Thursday because I got.
I have a tentative hold from BWW, but let me see what happens.
Okay. We'll figure it out.
It's like a virtual Q4 all-day meeting.
Oh, one of those.
Yeah.
Jeez. All right, Paul. Thank you.
All right.
Always
thank you.
Appreciate you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.